The wind howled across the high desert like a living thing that night, pushing against the old wooden walls of John Miller's ranch house. He had lived through many winters in this remote place, but the storm blowing in was sharper and colder than anything he had felt in years. The sky had turned a heavy gray earlier in the afternoon, and by evening, the first flakes of snow were falling fast, covering the open land in white. John moved slowly, bringing in the last pieces of firewood, pulling his jacket tighter as the icy air bit through the fabric. He had planned a quiet night, maybe a simple Thanksgiving dinner for himself. Nothing big, just a meal to remind him that even in loneliness, there were small things to be grateful for. He pushed the door shut behind him, set the firewood by the hearth, and wiped snow from his beard. The fire crackled warmly, filling the house with a comforting light. He was just about to check the oven when he heard a sound he didn't expect. A faint knock, soft, hesitant, almost afraid. For a moment he wondered if the storm was tricking his ears. But then it came again, a little louder. He walked to the door slowly, wondering who could possibly be out in weather like this. When he opened it, the freezing wind rushed in, and standing in the doorway was a woman, thin, shivering, wrapped in a torn shawl that was soaked from the snow. Her cheeks were red from the cold, her hair blown in every direction by the harsh wind. She looked exhausted, as if she had been walking for hours. Her eyes lifted to his, full of fear and hope at the same time. I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice shaking. "Please don't be scared. I need shelter for a little while. I've been walking since morning." The cold, her voice broke as she tried to steady her breath. John had seen people in need before, but something about her made him pause. She looked young, maybe around her late 20s, but her eyes carried a weight of loss and struggle. He hesitated, unsure what to say. He lived alone, far from town. Strangers rarely came by, and it had been years since anyone knocked on his door after sunset. The woman seemed to misunderstand his silence, because she suddenly stepped forward, her hands trembling as she held them together in front of her. "Please," she whispered, her words heavy with desperation. "I can cook for you. I can make Thanksgiving for you. Just don't turn me away. I don't want to freeze out there." Her words struck something deep inside him, the way she said them like she wasn't asking for comfort, only a chance to survive the night. John remembered a storm many years back, when he himself had nearly collapsed in the cold after losing his way in the snow. Someone had taken him in then, a stranger who didn't even know his name. That simple act had saved his life. He looked at the woman again and realized she was standing exactly as he had stood that night, cold, scared, unsure if anyone would help. "Come inside," John said gently, stepping aside. Her relief was immediate and overwhelming. She nodded quickly, almost stumbling as she stepped over the threshold. The warmth of the house wrapped around her like a blanket, and she closed the door softly behind her, as if afraid the world outside might follow her in. John guided her to the chair closest to the fire. She lowered herself into it with slow, careful movements, as though every muscle in her body ached. The fire crackled brighter when he added more wood, and she held her hands toward it, trying to warm her numb fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go." "I'm Naya." She said her name quietly, but with a kind of old dignity, as if it carried the memory of a life before hardship. John introduced himself and handed her a warm cup of tea. She held it as if it were the most precious thing she had been given in months. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The storm raged outside, but inside the house there was only the quiet sound of the fire and the soft breath of a woman trying to thaw her frozen hands. After a while, Naya spoke again. "I was heading south. My people moved, but I stayed behind for a little while. I thought I could manage on my own." She hesitated, lowering her gaze. "I was wrong. The cold came faster than I expected. I lost my way. I didn't mean to trouble anyone." "You're not troubling me," John said in his calm, steady voice. "You were out there in the storm. Anyone would open their door in a night like this." She looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. as if kindness was something she had stopped expecting from the world. She took a slow sip of the tea, allowing warmth to spread through her body. John noticed her clothes worn, patched in many places, not nearly enough to protect her from winter. The shawl she wore was torn at one side, the threads frayed from long use. After a few minutes, Naya spoke again. "I meant what I said. I can cook for you. It's the least I can do. You gave me shelter." She looked around shyly at his quiet, tidy home. "I haven't made a real meal in a long time. I would like to cook, if you allow me." John smiled slightly, though he kept it gentle so she wouldn't think he was laughing at her offer. "You don't have to cook for me," he said. "You're cold. Rest first." But she shook her head, a small, determined motion. "No. It will help me feel less like a burden. Please." He realized then that she wasn't offering food. She was offering dignity. She wanted to give something back, even if it was small. So he nodded and said she could help if she wanted. Slowly, she rose from the chair, still unsteady on her feet. She tested her balance for a moment, then followed him into the kitchen. Her movements were careful but graceful, as if she was used to kitchen work and had once done it with pride. John watched quietly as she touched the edges of the counter. The wooden spoons, the simple pots. She seemed almost emotional to be in a warm kitchen again. She asked permission before touching anything. And when she picked up a small bowl, she held it gently, like it reminded her of better days. As she prepared the vegetables and herbs, John noticed how her hands shook, not from fear now, but from exhaustion and cold that had sunk deep into her bones. Yet she worked with quiet focus, grateful for the chance to contribute. The smell of warm food filled the house slowly, a soft mix of herbs and roasted vegetables. John realized he hadn't shared a meal with anyone in years. The silence that often felt empty now felt peaceful. When they finally sat down to eat, Naya bowed her head slightly before taking her first bite, a silent gesture of thanks. She didn't speak aloud. She seemed calmer now, though still tired. The firelight made her eyes softer, less guarded. "This is good," John said honestly after tasting the meal. She smiled for the first time, a small and warm expression that changed her whole face. "I'm glad," she replied softly. It felt nice to cook again. They ate quietly, not needing many words. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but the house felt safe and full in a way it hadn't for a long time. As the night grew deeper, John realized he had let a stranger into his home, but she didn't feel like a stranger anymore. There was something honest in her presence, something steady despite all she had endured, and Naya, warming her hands over the fire after dinner, looked around his quiet home as if she had found a small piece of peace she thought she had lost forever. Neither of them said it out loud, but both felt that the simple act of opening a door had changed the night completely. The storm remained outside, but inside, hope had entered quietly with the freezing woman, who only wanted a chance to survive and to give something in return. The morning light slowly filled the ranch house, touching the wooden floor and giving everything a soft glow. John woke early, as he always did, and for a moment he forgot that someone else was sleeping under his roof. It was only when he stepped into the main room and saw the small bundle on the couch that the memory returned. Naya lay curled under the extra blanket he had given her, sleeping deeply, her breaths slow and steady. She looked peaceful, but also tired in a way that went beyond the long walk she had made through the storm. It was the kind of exhaustion that came from carrying too many heavy days alone. John didn't wake her. She had looked fragile the night before, and he knew she needed rest. The storm had weakened during the night but left a thick blanket of snow on the land. The window panes showed the world outside coated in white, and the air still carried the sharp bite of winter. No one should be traveling in that cold, especially not someone who had nearly frozen. He moved quietly through the house, making breakfast for himself. As he cooked, he found himself glancing toward the couch every now and then, almost surprised to see another person there. It had been years since anyone else had slept under his roof. The silence had become part of his life, and he had grown used to it. But now, strangely, the presence of another person didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt grounding. After about an hour, Naya stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the warm light of morning. She sat up, the blanket falling from her shoulders, and looked around with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. For a moment, she seemed confused, as if she expected to wake up outside again, in the cold. "You're safe," John said softly when he noticed her awake. She turned toward him and nodded, offering a shy smile. "Thank you. I didn't mean to sleep so long." "You needed it," he replied. "There's no rush here. Breakfast will be ready soon." Inra sighed. She stood carefully, stretching her arms as if her body still felt stiff from the cold night. She kept adjusting the shawl around her shoulders, embarrassed by the worn fabric and the holes in it. John saw the way she tried to stand straight despite everything, holding on to her dignity even in such simple moments. "Can I help?" she asked softly. "You're a guest," he said. "You don't have to." But she shook her head. "I want to. Helping makes me feel like I belong somewhere. Even if it's only for a short time." He didn't argue again. Instead, he handed her a small basket of bread to place on the table. She did it with careful movements, as if she wanted everything to look neat. When they finally sat down to eat, she took small bites, almost as if she was worried the food might run out. It made John realize just how long she must have struggled on her own. "You said your people moved?" John asked gently, not wanting to pry but wanting to understand her situation. She lowered her gaze for a moment. "Yes. They moved south last season. After my husband passed, I stayed behind to take care of something important." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But after a while, it became too hard to stay alone. I tried to follow them, but I didn't reach in time." There was a sadness in her eyes that spoke louder than her words. John didn't ask for details. Your heart could hear hurt without needing the full story. She continued slowly. "Some families helped me on the way. Others didn't." She hesitated. "People fear what they don't understand." John nodded. "People can be unkind, but they also change. Sometimes." She gave a faint smile. "Maybe." As she ate, her shoulders relaxed slightly, as if the warmth of the room and the simple kindness she received were slowly melting the fear she carried. After breakfast, she insisted on washing the dishes even though John told her she didn't need to. She gently dipped her chilled hands into the warm water and began cleaning slowly, as if grateful for even that small task. John stepped outside to check the snow level around the barn. The cold was sharp, but the sky had cleared. The horses snorted softly when he opened the barn door, waiting for their morning feed. While he worked, he kept thinking about the woman now standing in his kitchen, her quiet strength, her soft manners, her willingness to help even when she clearly needed rest. None of it fit the way people in town usually talked about outsiders or strangers. It reminded him that the world could judge quickly, but reality often told a different story. When he returned inside, he found Naya sweeping the floor gently with the old broom. She looked up, an apologetic look on her face, as if she expected him to be upset. "I know you said I didn't have to," she said softly, "but it helps me feel useful." "You don't need to explain," John replied. "I appreciate the help." Her expression softened. For someone who had spent so long trying not to be a burden, small acceptance felt big. Later that morning, she asked if she could bake something. She said she knew a simple recipe that didn't need many ingredients. John gave her permission, and he watched from the table as she mixed flour and water, working with a calm patience that made the kitchen feel warmer. He noticed her humming a quiet tune under her breath, one he didn't recognize but found comforting. As she placed the dough near the fire to rise, she sat down across from him. For a moment, they just sat in silence, listening to the fire crackle. "You've lived here long?" she finally asked. "Most of my life," he said. "The ranch has been in my family for years. It's peaceful here." "It is, but quiet can feel heavy sometimes." She nodded gently. "Quiet isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just alone." He saw her fingers tightening around the edge of her sleeve, She wasn't talking about the quiet land, she was talking about long days with no one to call her name. "Do you plan to continue south when the weather clears?" he asked. She hesitated. "I don't know. I want to. But I don't have much left. No warm clothes. No place to stop along the way. And work is hard to find." She lowered her voice. "Sometimes I feel like I don't belong anywhere anymore." Her words made his chest tighten with quiet sympathy. He understood that feeling more than she knew. Losing his wife had left him wandering inside his own home for years, living with familiar walls but an empty heart. "You're welcome to stay here until the weather improves," he said. Her eyes widened slightly, surprised by the offer. "I don't want to burden you," she said again, softly but firmly. "You're not," he replied. "You helped me the moment you stepped into this house. You reminded me what warmth feels like." She seemed deeply moved by his words, as if no one had spoken to her with such simple kindness in a long time. By afternoon, they shared the bread she baked, warm and soft. It filled the house with a comforting smell, something gentle and healing. When she saw John's genuine smile after he tasted it, she looked as if someone had given her a gift she didn't expect. For the rest of the day, they worked quietly together, feeding the animals, bringing in more firewood, cleaning small corners of the house. None of it felt forced. It felt like two lonely lives, slowly learning to trust the presence of another person again. That evening, they sat by the fire as the world outside froze once more. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was warm. Naya looked into the flames and said softly, almost to herself, "It feels like this house remembers how to breathe again." John looked at her, and for the first time in years, he felt the same way. Snow still covered the land the next morning, but the storm had passed. The sky was clearer, and a pale sun shone faintly over the white fields. John and Naya stepped outside together, their breaths forming small clouds in the cold air. The silence of the ranch felt softer now, not as heavy as before. For the first time in a long while, John didn't feel lonely at sunrise. He showed Naya where the horses were kept and how the feeding routine worked. She listened carefully to everything, nodding, asking quiet questions. She moved slowly at first because her body still felt stiff from days of walking in the cold. But she tried her best to help. It touched John how eager she was to contribute, even though she had every reason to rest. Later that morning, he rode into town to buy supplies and asked if she wanted to come along. She hesitated, unsure if she should, but then she agreed. She didn't want to hide from people. She didn't want to be afraid anymore. As they traveled, the cold wind brushed against their faces, and the world looked peaceful under the snow-covered hills. But peace didn't last long. As soon as they reached town, John noticed something change in the air. People turned their heads, staring toward Naya as she dropped down from the wagon. Some looked surprised, others uncertain. A few simply whispered to each other without even trying to hide it. Their eyes followed her every movement, and she kept her hands close to her shawl, trying to appear smaller than she was. John felt a small knot form in his stomach. He knew how quickly talk traveled in a small community. News of a lone woman visiting his ranch last night must have reached town before he did. They walked into the small general store to buy supplies. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, greeted John politely at first. But his expression changed when he noticed Naya standing behind him. He didn't say anything rude, but the warmth in his voice faded. He counted the coins slowly, avoiding eye contact with her, as if her presence bothered him, but he didn't want to speak it aloud. Naya kept her gaze low, her shoulders tense. She said nothing, even though the silence around her felt heavy. Outside the store, a couple of townsfolk stood near the well, whispering as they watched John and Naya walk past. One woman glanced directly at Naya, then looked away quickly, shaking her head. Another man stared openly, confusion on his face, almost as if he wanted to ask what she was doing there. John tried to ignore it. He had grown used to people talking, especially when they had nothing better to do. But this time, it bothered him more than usual. He didn't want Naya to feel unwelcome. As they walked toward the blacksmith's shop, Naya spoke quietly, her voice barely above the wind. Maybe I shouldn't have come with you. John slowed his steps. You have every right to be here. She gave him a small, sad smile. People look at me like I don't belong. I'm used to it. But I don't want to cause trouble for you. You're not causing trouble, he said firmly. People talk because it's easier than understanding. She nodded, but he could tell her heart still felt heavy. Inside the blacksmith shop, the heat from the furnace warmed the room. John spoke with the blacksmith about repairing a metal hinge from his barn. The blacksmith answered, but every now and then, he glanced at Naya. His look wasn't unkind, but it was cautious, like he wasn't sure what to make of her. When they finished their errands, John and Naya climbed back onto the wagon. As they rode home, she kept her arms wrapped around herself. Not from the cold, but from the uncomfortable feeling the town had left inside her. After a long silence, she finally asked, "Is everyone here like that?" "Not everyone," John said softly. "Some people judge quickly. Some people remember things that happened long ago. And some just don't understand your story." She looked out over the snowy land. "I don't blame them. They don't know me. They don't know what I've been through." He glanced at her. "You're stronger than they see. You helped me more in one night than they know." Her eyes softened, touched by his words. But she still seemed troubled. When they returned to the ranch, Naya went inside quietly and began preparing a simple meal. John could tell she was trying to distract herself. She moved carefully in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, heating broth, and focusing on small tasks to steady her thoughts. He watched her for a moment, noticing how her hands slowed when she thought too much, how her eyes dimmed every time she remembered the stairs from town. That afternoon, she went outside to gather water. As she walked back toward the house, she looked around at the land wide, open, peaceful. A small smile touched her lips. Here, she didn't feel the eyes of strangers following her. Here, she could breathe. Still, the memory of the townspeople's whispers stayed with her. She had spent so much of her life trying to survive that she had forgotten what it felt like to be accepted. She feared she would become a burden to John, or worse, that her presence would bring him trouble from the community. When John joined her outside, she tried to speak casually. "I can leave when the weather gets better," she said quietly. "You've already helped me enough." He looked at her with a steady expression. "You don't need to rush away. You're safe here." "But the people in town," she began. "Let them talk," he said firmly. "They don't know you. They don't know what happened in your life. And they don't get to decide who you are." Her breath trembled slightly, not from the cold but from the unexpected warmth of his words. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded, her eyes softening as she whispered, "Thank you." That evening, as she cooked dinner, John noticed something different. She moved with more care than usual, as if she wanted the meal to be perfect. Maybe she felt she owed him, or maybe she simply wanted to express gratitude in the way she knew best. She seasoned the food gently, tasted the broth, and adjusted it until the flavor was just right. When they sat down to eat, she watched him carefully. When she saw him smile after taking the first bite, relief washed over her face. "It's very good," he said. She let out a small breath, and her shoulders relaxed. After dinner, they sat by the fire again. The quiet was warm, not empty. A soft glow lit the room, and the sound of crackling wood filled the space between them. Naya looked into the flames and said, "I'm not afraid of work. I'm not afraid of the cold. But sometimes I get afraid of people." John nodded slowly. "People can be harder than storms." She laughed softly, surprised he understood so well. "Yes, storms come and go. People stay with their thoughts. And at Reeser, ironically signed her, and their captivideo, and at Reeser fawn life, Relinder, 17 a down. Again that, ironically doc, 17 a You don't have to face either of them alone," he said. The fire flickered gently across her face, And for the first time since she arrived, she didn't look like someone expecting to be pushed away. She looked like someone who had found a small place where she could stand, at least for now. The world outside remained cold. But in the little ranch house, two people sat together, each carrying their own past, slowly learning that kindness could warm more than the hands it could warm a heart that had been cold for far too long. The next few days passed quietly at the ranch. Snow still covered most of the land, but the sun showed itself more often, melting thin patches here and there. Naya settled into a gentle routine, helping with small chores, preparing meals, mending torn fabric, and offering a quiet presence that filled the empty air of the house. John had grown used to seeing her near the fire or outside carrying a small bucket of water. She moved softly, never wanting to disturb anything, yet her presence brought warmth to everything she touched. Every morning, she tried to do a little more than the day before, even though John told her she didn't have to. He could see that helping gave her a sense of purpose, a feeling she had lost after months of struggling alone. And though she never said it directly, he could tell she felt grateful to have a place where she wasn't treated like an outsider. But peace doesn't last untouched, especially in small towns where talk travels faster than the wind. One cold afternoon, John was repairing a fence near the front of the property. Naya was inside, baking something warm, a soft smell drifting through the open kitchen window. The sky was a pale blue, and the air carried the sharp bite of winter. John heard the sound of approaching footsteps crunching over snow. When he looked up, he saw a man walking toward him from the direction of the road. It was Mark Stedman, a local known for stirring trouble wherever he went. He was a tall man with a stiff posture and a sharp expression that rarely softened. John had dealt with him before, but never with patience. Mark always had something to complain about, and today, his expression showed he was ready for more than a simple chat. Mark didn't greet him. He stopped a few feet away and crossed his arms. "Heard you're keeping someone at your place," he said in a tone that carried judgment from the very first word. John set down the hammer and wiped snow from his gloves. "I have a guest," he answered calmly. Mark huffed. "Guest? People in town are wondering what you're thinking, letting a stranger stay here. You don't even know her story." "I know what I need to," John replied simply. Mark stepped closer. "You think that's smart? Letting someone from outside, someone we barely understand, live under your roof? What if something goes wrong?" John kept his tone steady, but his jaw tightened. "She was freezing in a storm. I did what any decent person would do." "Decent?" Mark scoffed. "You call this decent? You're bringing trouble to your doorstep. The whole town's talking, and no one's happy about it." John's patience began to strain. "Let them talk," he said. "Oh, they will," Mark replied sharply. "They don't want someone like her staying around. She should move on. Maybe you should encourage her to." Before John could respond, the sound of the front door opening reached them. Naya stepped out quietly, carrying a small bowl of warm bread she had just baked. She had no idea anyone was visiting. When she saw Mark, she stopped mid-step, her expression tightening. She didn't know him, but she knew the tone of someone who came to question her presence. She could feel it even before he spoke. Mark turned his head toward her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "There she is," he said under his breath. Then, louder, he added, "You shouldn't be here." Naya held the bowl close to her chest, unsure what to do. Her voice was barely audible when she spoke. I'm only helping. I don't want to cause trouble." Mark shook his head. "Helping? People like you bring problems, not help." Her shoulders dropped, as if the words struck something deep inside her. John saw the hurt flash across her face, and something inside him snapped, not with anger, but with firm resolve. "That's enough," John said, stepping between them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His tone carried a quiet strength that even Mark couldn't ignore. "You don't talk to her like that." "Not here." Mark frowned. "I'm telling you the truth. She needs to leave." Before what?" John interrupted. "Before people talk more? Let them. Before you start trouble? That's your decision, not hers." Mark opened his mouth again, but John continued. She walked through a storm, half frozen. She cooked a warm meal when she could barely stand. She's helping around the ranch without being asked. His voice remained calm, but each word carried weight. She has done nothing wrong. And I won't send away someone who needs shelter just because people don't understand her. For the first time, Mark looked uncertain, thrown off by the firmness in John's tone. I'm not discussing this further, John said. You've said your part. Now go home. Mark stared at him, irritated but defeated. After a long moment, he muttered something under his breath and turned away, stomping back toward the road. His figure slowly disappeared behind the snowy trees. When he was gone, silence fell over the ranch. Naya stood still, the bowl trembling slightly in her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't want to cause trouble. I never meant for anyone to come here because of me. You didn't cause anything, John said gently. She lowered her gaze. People like him. They think I don't belong anywhere. John stepped closer, speaking softly. You belong right here, in this moment, safe and warm. You've helped me more than you realize. Her eyes lifted slowly toward his, filled with gratitude but also fear of being pushed away once again. I can pack my things if it's better, she said softly. I don't want anyone to bother you. No, John replied firmly. You're not leaving because of him. You did nothing wrong. You brought warmth back into this house. You brought life into it. That matters more than anything, he said. Her breath shook as she exhaled. A tear didn't fall, but her eyes glistened with emotion. She tried to hide. Thank you, she said quietly. I don't know why you are so kind, but thank you. John shook his head. It's not kindness. It's the right thing to do. They walked back inside together. The house felt warmer than before, not because of the fire, but because of the simple truth that someone had finally stood up for her. Naya set the warm bread on the table with gentle hands. She looked around the kitchen with softer eyes, no longer expecting to be told to leave. As the evening settled in, the fire crackled in the hearth, filling the house with a gentle glow. Naya sat near it, warming her hands, while John repaired a small chair nearby. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. The silence between them was peaceful, full of trust, gratitude, and something slowly growing that neither of them dared to name yet. Outside, winter pressed against the walls, but inside the ranch, two people shared a simple, quiet strength that no storm and no outsider's words could break. Winter deepened across the land in the weeks that followed. The early mornings were colder, the snow thicker, and the wind sharper. But inside John's ranch house, warmth grew quietly day by day, sometimes from the fire, sometimes from the shared moments between two people who had slowly learned to trust each other. Naya settled naturally into life at the ranch. She woke early, often before John, and boiled water for tea. She fed the chickens, swept the porch, and kept the hearth warm so the mornings didn't feel so heavy. John handled the heavier tasks, repairing fences, tending the horses, clearing snow from the path. They worked side by side without needing many words, each finding comfort in the other's presence. One morning, as John stepped outside with a bucket of feed, he glanced toward the horizon. The sky had turned a clear blue, and a soft breeze carried a hint of spring, even though snow still covered the ground. He stood there for a while, thinking about how much had changed since the stormy night when Naya had knocked on his door. The ranch no longer felt empty. The silence no longer felt like loneliness. Naya's gentle footsteps, her calm voice, and her thoughtful habits had brought life back to a place that had grown quiet after too many years of sorrow. Inside the house, Naya was kneading dough for bread. Her hands moved softly, steady, and sure. She hummed a quiet tune, one John had heard her hum several times now, a soothing melody that always made the house feel warmer. When he returned inside, she looked up, her eyes bright from the glow of the fire. The weather is changing, he said, removing his gloves. She smiled softly. I can feel it too. Maybe spring will come early. Her smile warmed him more than the fire ever could. Later that day, as they shared lunch, Naya spoke in a careful tone. When spring comes, maybe I should think about what to do next. She didn't look at him at first, as if afraid of his reaction. You've helped me so much. I don't want to overstay. John didn't answer immediately. He took a quiet breath, thinking deeply before he finally said, Spring isn't here yet. There's time. She nodded, but her expression carried a mixture of relief and sadness. She knew she couldn't stay forever, but the thought of leaving the only safe place she'd found in months made her heart tighten. As the days went on, the nearby town began to soften slowly toward her. People who once whispered now watched from a distance with curiosity rather than distrust. They saw the smoke rising from John's chimney every day. They saw Naya walking carefully along the path to town for flour or cloth. And they realized she caused no harm. Some even greeted her quietly, though still with caution. The first person to truly shift was Mrs. Adler, an older woman who lived near the general store. One afternoon, when Naya came to buy a small bag of grain, Mrs. Adler stepped forward and offered her a warm scarf she had knitted. You look like you could use this, she said gently, placing it in Naya's hands. Naya was surprised. She hesitated, unsure if she should accept. But Mrs. Adler simply smiled and said, Everyone deserves warmth. It was a small moment, but it meant more than words. When Naya returned home with the scarf, John noticed the soft fabric wrapped around her neck. That's new, he said. She touched it gently. Someone gave it to me. She was kind. I'm glad, John replied with a quiet smile. The ice between Naya and the community didn't melt all at once, but little by little, respect grew where fear had been. People saw her kindness, her quiet strength, and the way she worked hard every day. Over time, small gestures of acceptance replaced the whispers. One evening, after finishing their chores, John and Naya sat near the fire. The room glowed with warm light, and the snow outside reflected the moon like silver. Naya watched the flames dance while holding the scarf Mrs. Adler had given her. Do you ever feel like life brings people together for a reason? She asked softly. John nodded slowly. Sometimes. I didn't expect anyone to show up at my door that night, but now, it's hard to imagine the house without you. Her eyes softened, touched deeply by his honesty. She looked down at her hands. You gave me a place to rest when I didn't think I'd find one again. I'll never forget that. John hesitated before speaking again. You don't have to leave when spring comes. Not unless you want to. She looked up, surprised, almost unsure if she heard him correctly. You're serious? Yes, he said simply. This house has room. And the ranch, it's easier with two people working together. Her hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from emotion she had been holding inside. I never wanted to be a burden. You never were. Silence settled between them, but it was warm and full of meaning. Spring arrived slowly over the next several weeks. Snow melted into small streams that ran down the hills. Fresh grass peeked through the earth. Birds returned to the sky, filling the air with soft songs. The ranch transformed into a place of life again. With the change in season, the townspeople grew friendlier toward Naya. Mrs. Adler invited her for tea. The shopkeeper who once avoided her eyes now greeted her kindly. Even Mark Stedman, who had caused trouble earlier, kept his distance and didn't speak another harsh word. One afternoon, as Naya hung washed clothes on a line outside, a pair of children passed by the fence. They waved at her shyly. She waved back. Moments like that filled her heart with relief and quiet joy, proof that the world could soften, even if slowly. As spring turned warmer, John and Naya stood on the porch together one evening, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky glowed orange and pink, peaceful and wide. Naya felt a calm she had long forgotten. She had arrived here with cold, fear, and an uncertain future. Now, she stood with warmth in her heart and hope in her eyes. Do you remember the night you arrived? John asked quietly. She nodded. I thought the cold would take me. I didn't think anyone would open their door. I'm glad I did, he said. Me too, she whispered. He turned to her. So, do you still plan to leave? She looked out toward the land, the place that had sheltered her, fed her, and given her back something she thought she'd lost. "No," she said softly. "I want to stay. If that's fine with you." A gentle smile spread across John's face. "It's more than fine." They stood together in the fading light, two lives that had been broken in different ways now finding strength together, not through grand gestures but through quiet moments of care and trust. Naya had come seeking shelter, offering only a meal in return. She stayed because she found something far greater: peace, respect, and a home where she could finally breathe. John had lived in silence for years, carrying memories and loss alone. But now, the house felt full again, warmth in the kitchen, soft footsteps in the hallway, and laughter returning in small, gentle ways. Neither knew exactly what the future would bring, but they knew one thing with certainty. The door that opened on that freezing night had changed both their lives forever. And as the first stars appeared above the ranch, the world around them felt calm, safe, and full of possibilities yet to come.